Hey, Soviet Union. The heck is this?
Oh, that? Well, you see, comrade, that is just our latest and greatest aerial weapon, the MiG-25.
I see. I think I'm gonna call it Foxbat.
Why don't you just use our names?
No, I will never be doing that. So what does it do?
Why would I tell you?
Oh, no, just ask it. It's a simple question. Looks like an air superiority fighter, actually. Might be better than anything we have right now.
Well, actually, it's just a very high-speed interceptor. I mean, yes, comrade. That's exactly what it is. So much better than anything you have.
Have you not learned not to tell him things like that?
What? What is he going to do? Make something so superior that we'll never be able to catch up? Yes. Yes, that is exactly what he's going to do.
All done!
Wait, what? Why do I hear boss music, comrade? I tried to warn you. Oh. Niet. I tried to warn you!
The McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle, otherwise known as the fighteriest fighter jet ever to fight in the fighter jet stuff. Yeah, that joke fell flat on its face. Listen! This is like the best plane America's ever made, or one of them. It's definitely up there. Easily one of the best of its generation, arguably the best of its generation. A twin-engine, all-weather fighter aircraft designed to meet the needs of a dedicated air superiority fighter. But the F-15 wound up being a lot more than that. The platform proved to be insanely flexible, to the point that nearly 50 years after they were first introduced, variants of the plane are still flying in America, not even with secondary buyers. No. I mean, we are still using the F-15. That's an insane longevity for a military aircraft. The only one I can think of offhand that's had a longer life is the B-52. And those things will never die, ever. They're just not allowed to. The origins of the F-15 can be traced back to the early days of the Vietnam War, when military procurement was getting obnoxious for basically everybody involved in America. See, the defense secretary at the time, Robert McNamara, was insistent that both the Air Force and the Navy use common aircraft. He wanted them to utilize the same planes, because then they'd have, well, the same parts, and overall it would reduce cost for military procurement. On paper, from a financial perspective, it makes complete sense, but realistically, this is an incredibly stupid thing to do. Because, well, frankly, the Navy and the Air Force are very different beasts when it comes to their needs, what they want and want to do with their planes. They can't always use the same plane. And historically speaking, very rarely do they share planes. Sometimes they do, the most famous example probably being the F-4. But the F-4 was designed initially for the Navy and just happened to be a flexible platform that could be utilized for a lot of different purposes, which is why both the Air Force and the Marines wound up using it. But on the flip side, there was also the TFX program, which came out with the F-111 Aardvark, which was a complete mess, frankly. As it turned out, producing a similar plane for both the Navy and the Air Force was a very tall order and still is even now. And in the end, only the Air Force adopted their version of the F-111. The F-111B, which was meant to go to the Navy, wasn't accepted. They just said no, because it wasn't good enough. It was too difficult to make both branches happy with the same plane. And this would cause a lot of problems over the following years and throughout the Vietnam War. Both the Air Force and the Navy were constantly asked to adopt similar aircraft. But, for example, in 1965, McNamara wanted the Air Force to consider a new low-cost tactical fighter design to replace some aging airframes. A reasonable request, but again, they had to agree with the Navy on the next plane. The existing aircraft that could handle this consisted of the Douglas A-4 Skyhawk and the LTV A-7 Corsair IIs, which the Navy happened to favor, but those were pure attack aircraft. They weren't designed for air-to-air. The Air Force, on the other hand, preferred the Northrop F-5, which had a secondary ground attack capability. It was mainly supposed to be a fighter, and the Air Force was looking for a plane that could do both. A ground attack platform that could also, shoot back at enemy air defenses in the sky. The F-5 fit that role. But the Navy wasn't interested in the F-5, so it was one of those things where it's like, okay, listen, we gotta agree on something. Well, again, they really only agreed on the Phantoms. The Phantoms made everyone kind of happy for a while, but the Phantoms were being tasked with a lot, and I mean a lot of different roles. Plus, when it came to dogfighting, the Phantoms could do it, but throughout the Vietnam War it was shown that they had some weaknesses when compared to certain Soviet fighters, and mostly down to maneuverability. The Phantoms could turn pretty well, but not as well as some of the Soviet designs. Plus, they initially didn't have any guns. Which, at the time, everyone was thinking, oh, don't worry, we just use missiles, we don't need guns anymore. No. No, you do. You still need the guns. Badly. Especially when you're telling Phantom pilots to fly with visual engagement rules, meaning they had to visually identify the enemy before firing, which means get close enough to use guns. By that point, the enemy can shoot back. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what are you doing? It was a mess, as were most things with the Vietnam War, to be honest. But in the background, as early as 1965, Harold Brown, who was in those days the director of the Department of Defense Research and Engineering, pushed for the idea to begin studies on a more modern jet, then called the FX. Early design studies into this envisioned a production run of 800 to 1,000 aircraft, and they were looking for maneuverability over speed. The Phantoms, for example, were fast, blindingly so. But they weren't as maneuverable as some other planes. The FX was meant to supplant this by making available what was a much better dogfighter. An official document for this was finalized by October of 1965, and the brass would send out a request for proposals to 13 different companies. The Air Force would eventually swallow their pride and take some A-7s, but that meant they were left in desperate need of an air superiority fighter. In terms of the FX program, 8 companies did respond with various different proposals. This was eventually shrunk down to simply 4, and around 500 design concepts were submitted. Most of them actually featured variable sweep wing designs, similar to the F-111, which did have that feature. But the problem was a lot of these concepts were considered too large. They were similar to the size of an F-111. And the F-111s are not that great at air superiority. They're too big for that. I mean, they can do air-to-air, but they aren't optimized for it. None of those early designs were really accepted, and in the meantime, the Vietnam War was still causing issues. The F-4 Phantoms were modified and upgraded to have the M61 Vulcan cannon installed. allowing them to dogfight a lot better, especially in close quarters, but they still felt that they could have and should have a much better air superiority option. Right after the Navy rejected their version of the F-111, they started development of a new dedicated fighter design known as the VFAX program. McNamara would again ask both the Air Force and the Navy to study the designs and see if the VFAX program could meet the Air Force's FX needs. And once again, it was realized that no, it won't. These two branches do things completely differently from each other. They need dedicated platforms. You can't share everything. Then in 1967, a pretty major problem was discovered. At least a problem, but we thought it was a problem. Let me explain. The Soviet Union would reveal the Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-25, NATO reporting name Foxbat. Now, to Western analysts, the MiG-25 appeared to be a serious problem. An insane air superiority fighter that would be much better than basically anything we had. It had higher speed, ceiling, and endurance. It looked a lot like some of the larger FX studies that had been rejected, that it had a large wing, suggesting high maneuverability. The American intelligence agencies kind of panicked, not realizing that, frankly, we were kind of overestimating the MiG-25. Now, the MiG-25s are not bad planes, but they are not what we thought they were. What the MiG-25 actually is a dedicated interceptor, as well as reconnaissance aircraft. The thing can fly very high and is blindingly fast, technically being capable of going faster than Mach 3.2. Though, basically they never did that, because at those speeds their engines would actually break themselves. They really shouldn't be doing that, but they could go as fast as Mach 2.83. Still very, very fast. But that's all they were good for. Fast. Really, really fast. They couldn't turn super well. They sacrificed a lot of maneuverability for what they did, and was mostly constructed out of nickel-steel alloy. This was meant to help shield it from thermal stresses above Mach 2. And at the end of the day, what you need to know is that the MiG-25 is not an air superiority fighter, it is just an interceptor. It can do that really, really well, but not much else. But we didn't know that. To us, looking at it, we thought that this was going to be an insanely good air superiority fighter that could destroy anything we had, so we had to fix that up right quick. But the Air Force in general was dealing with a lot of infighting. No one could agree as to whether or not they really needed a solely air superiority fighter, and many continued to call for a multi-role aircraft, while others pushed for the pure air superiority design. In the meantime, the Navy had ended the VFAX program and taken a proposal from Grumman for a smaller and more maneuverable design that would be called the VFX, which would evolve into the Grumman F-14 Tomcat. And I just have to stop right now. You mean to tell me the Tomcat is the smaller of the designs you were working with? Interesting. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the F-14, but how big was the VFAX? Because the Tomcats are not small planes. They're chunky. Like, are you kidding me? That was the smaller option? What the heck were you doing? But hey, whatever. And regardless, the Air Force was actually paranoid that the Navy's design would wind up being forced on them. So in May of 1968, they just said, the heck with it. We're going with the air superiority option, period. No more arguing, because if we do, we're going to get something that nobody actually wants. In September of 1968, they submitted another request for proposals to major aerospace companies, and the requirements called for a single-seat fighter having a maximum takeoff weight of 40,000 pounds for an air-to-air roll with a maximum speed of Mach 2.5 and a thrust-to-weight ratio of nearly 1-to-1. They also requested a twin-engined arrangement, but beyond that the request was pretty vague. Details of the avionics were relatively minuscule. They didn't put a lot of requirements. They wanted to see what the companies came up with. And 4 companies wound up responding: General Dynamics, Fairchild Republic, North American Rockwell, and McDonnell Douglas. General Dynamics option was eliminated early, with the other 3 moving forward for the definition phase in December of 1968. And all 3 of them submitted their technical proposals by June of 1969. By the end of December of that year, the Air Force announced they had chosen McDonnell Douglas's proposal. and the design work was largely rushed. Normally, they would have gone to a prototype phase and done some slow, methodical testing, but they were afraid the project might get cancelled, and they wanted to get a decent plane in the air as quickly as possible, so instead they jumped straight to full-scale development. What McDonnell Douglas submitted was very similar to the F-14, but not quite the same. It was a bit smaller, not much, but a bit. But it did have the twin-tail arrangement, as well as dual engines, of course. But it also had fixed wings. This is not a variable wing design. It's understandable that they wind up with a similar look, because both of them were based on configurations that were studied in wind tunnel tests conducted by NASA. And eventually, it would come to be called the F-15 Eagle, coming with two initial versions, the single-seat regular F-15 as well as the T-F-15 twin-seat variant. Though later the F-15C would come along, and the aforementioned versions would be renamed to F-15A and F-15B. They were powered by the brand new at the time Pratt & Whitney F-100 engine. Well, two of them, of course. And with those engines, it gave these planes a thrust-to-weight ratio that was in excess of 1-to-1. So it went beyond the Air Force's requirements. And the first F-15 and F-15A took to the skies on July 27, 1972. The F-15B would follow in July of 1973. Just the following year, the very first Eagle, an F-15B, was delivered to the Air Force on November 13, 1974. And from that point forward, everything changed over in the Air Force because the Eagles were really, really good. I don't think you understand what they kind of stumbled into. In a knee-jerk reaction, panicked by a Soviet plane that they didn't realize wasn't nearly as good as they thought, they wound up creating arguably the best Generation 4 fighter there is. All versions of the F-15 went far beyond the requirements that were actually set for them. They were fast, agile, and incredibly capable pieces of equipment, and remain so. They learned from a lot of mistakes they had made when they procured the Phantoms. For example, the F-15 came with, a gun! And pilots really appreciated that. But to be honest, even without the gun, the F-15 probably could have relied only on their missiles because they were much more agile than the Phantoms. Able to take much tighter turns and climb much quicker. Pretty much everything about them was better, but they were a later design, so it's only natural they'd outclass the Phantoms. Plenty of foreign buyers really wanted them too, including Japan, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. Japan in particular was the largest customer. They adored the Eagles, to the point that they actually had Mitsubishi craft their own version. Theirs is called the F-15J, and it has some unique quirks that make it ideal for the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. As far as the other two customers, well, Israel has gotten a lot of use out of the F-15s. They've shot down a ton of planes in various conflicts, and Saudi Arabia has also seen significant benefits from them. But as for us in America, well, the real test for our Eagles was in the Gulf War, the initial one, where the Eagle distinguished themselves. See, in total, the U.S. Air Force counted 39 air-to-air victories during that conflict. Out of 39, 36 were because of the Eagle. So yeah, it was really good. So good that the platform was used beyond just being an air superiority fighter. McDonnell Douglas had quietly, in the early phases of development, considered the possibility of utilizing the F-15 for a ground attack role. There were certain optimizations and changes that could be made to make it really good for that too. Eventually, it was decided that this would be a thing. As by 1981, the Air Force wanted to replace the F-111s. McDonnell Douglas had been privately working on the concept and submitted what would become the F-15E Strike Eagle, which was eventually accepted. The F-15E is an F-15, but it's optimized for ground attack and can also do air-to-air. It can do both. It's a multi-role platform, proving that the Eagle is incredibly flexible, like its predecessor, the F-4. Even after McDonnell Douglas's merger with Boeing, well, Boeing would continue producing F-15s in various forms to even now. The latest version being the Boeing F-15EX Eagle II. This is another multi-role version, evolved from the Strike Eagle, and incorporates a tremendous amount of modern features into an airframe that, remember, was developed, about half a century ago. The F-15 is many people's favorite fighter for a reason. They are so very good. So good that many think they have never actually been taken down in combat. There's no combat losses for them, and that's not quite right. Okay, if the statement is they never lost any air-to-air battle, that's true. An F-15 has never been shot down by another enemy plane. They've never lost a dogfight of any variety. But they have taken some losses from ground fire. We lost 2 in the Gulf War, for example, one due to anti-aircraft guns, and another due to a surface-to-air missile. So they're not invincible, but they never lost an actual, dogfight. So hey, that's relevant. And there was once an issue involving a structural defect with the F-15s. Back in 2007, an Air National Guard F-15C broke apart mid-flight and crashed, and it resulted in many of the older Eagles being grounded pending investigation. Later, it was discovered that this wasn't really the F-15's fault exactly. I mean, it was in this individual's case, but it was due to a manufacturing defect. A part of the plane, called the longeron, didn't actually meet the drawing specifications, meaning that it hadn't been built as it should have been. It would be discovered later that at least 9 other F-15s had the same problem, and this caused fatigue cracking. But all the airframes were reviewed, and those that needed this problem fixed, well, had it fixed. So, that was the only minor hiccup when it came to the F-15's design. Beyond that, though, they're great, and continue to fly in both our military, as well as our foreign buyers' militaries. There was even the F-15 STOL/MTD, which would wind up adding forward canards and thrust vectoring, because they wanted to see how maneuverable they can make an F-15. It was a technology demonstrator, never entered service, but it's really friggin' cool, you guys! America! Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fun farewell.